It started with the sharp edge of my sister's voice cutting through the chatter in my earbuds as I stepped off the subway in Midtown Manhattan. "Don't embarrass us in front of your cousins," she'd said, her tone equal parts warning and exasperation. My heart thudded against my ribs like a drum in an empty auditorium. I closed my eyes and took a steadying breath, reminding myself that today could be the turning point I'd fought for over the past year. The towering glass facade of the event space glittered in the afternoon sun. I clutched a leather-bound folder in my hand containing the final acquisition agreement for my startup, the document that would change everything. It felt impossibly heavy. I entered the reception area, where polished marble floors reflected the glow of crystal chandeliers overhead. A string quartet played a familiar classical piece, its melody weaving through the soft hum of conversation. Caterers in crisp white shirts and black bow ties circulated with trays of hors d'oeuvres. I spotted my cousin Rachel near the dessert table, her auburn hair bouncing as she laughed at something my cousin Mark had whispered. They didn't notice me at first. I straightened my posture. I reminded myself to take a steadying deep breath. This announcement wasn't just a gesture of success. It was proof of validation after countless nights working under fluorescent office lights in a cramped Brooklyn loft. My mind raced as I navigated through clusters of relatives I hadn't seen since last summer's barbecue in Cleveland. The night before, I barely slept, my mind racing with possibilities and dread. Aunt Lorraine waved enthusiastically, extending a glass of champagne my way. Uncle Jorge patted my back with pride. I nodded and offered polite small talk, all while counting down the seconds to the reveal. They had no idea my revenue had soared past 8 figures. Earlier that morning, I'd inked the deal to sell my company to Anderson Global, a Chicago-based conglomerate. It was more than a transaction. It felt like vindication of every coding marathon, every pitch deck polished until my eyes blurred. And I was about to share that triumph right here. Among the people who had seen me as the perpetual underdog, I found a quiet corner near the grand staircase and ran through the talking points one last time. The flicker of candlelight on the banister reminded me of the many late nights I'd spent debugging code by the glow of a lone desk lamp. My pulse caught in my throat as the chandeliers glittered like distant galaxies. A glance at my sister revealed the caution mixed with excitement that fueled her sharp nudge. This was my moment to shine without making anyone uncomfortable. I forced a casual grin and turned toward the crowd, ready to command their attention. I stepped onto the staircase as the quartet concluded its piece and the room fell into a polite hush. My pulse thrummed in my ears louder than the click of heels against marble. I raised my free hand to quiet the whispers that rippled through the gathering. "Excuse me," I began, my voice steady despite the tremor I felt inside. "I have an announcement." I inhaled deeply, letting the anticipation swirl. "This morning, I closed the acquisition of my company by Anderson Global, a Chicago-based conglomerate. The terms are private, but the deal is substantial, and I wanted you all to be the first to know." The words landed heavier than I expected. Silence settled like a thick velvet curtain. Then, a burst of claps, cheers erupted around me, but I raised my hands. "Thank you," I said, pressing my palms together in gratitude. "I want to acknowledge everyone who supported me, my mentors, friends, and especially my family." My sister's eyes glistened with unshed tears. I glanced at my mother, whose expression was a mix of awe and something I couldn't quite read. Relief and exhilaration pulsed through me. Cousins who had once teased me about living in that cramped loft in Brooklyn now approached with newfound respect. Even my stoic Uncle Jorge cracked a smile as he shook my hand. Yet beneath the warmth, I felt a flicker of something else, the weight of expectations that might change everything for good or for ill. As the crowd returned to their conversations, I lingered at the top of the staircase, scanning familiar faces illuminated by crystal lights. The taste of champagne and whispered congratulations mingled with my racing thoughts. Was I ready for the responsibilities that came with my success? The board at Anderson Global expected growth and expansion, and I was their president now. Gone were the days of coding solo until dawn. Ahead lay meetings in high-rise boardrooms, travel to Chicago, and negotiating strategies on behalf of millions. I pictured complex spreadsheets and quarterly reports occupying my waking hours. I slipped the folder into my briefcase. I stepped down and approached Rachel, who still wore that radiant smile. She asked, "So, how does it feel right now?" Exhilarated and terrified. I descended the grand staircase, pulse still racing from the announcement, and felt a strange mix of triumph and trepidation settling in my chest. The chandeliers overhead shimmered like distant constellations, casting dancing lights across the marble floor as I rejoined the flow of family and colleagues. My sister caught my eye and offered an encouraging nod. I forced a smile that didn't quite mask the swirl of doubts in my mind. The congratulatory cluster around me began to disperse, leaving pockets of conversation that seemed to orbit my success, drawing in distant relatives who had barely noticed my presence moments before. With each whispered congratulations, I felt both buoyed and burdened by the expectations now tethered to my name. I knew instinctively that the comfort of anonymity had slipped away, replaced by the glare of opportunity and scrutiny. Aunt Lorraine approached, her silver hair perfectly coiled, and clasped my hands in both of hers. Her voice trembled as she praised me, but her eyes glistened with something else, concern, maybe, or the echo of her own memories. She'd been a schoolteacher, the embodiment of careful planning and structured ambition, and I wondered if she saw my path as reckless or courageous. I nodded and thanked her, careful to keep my reply neutral. Engaging too deeply just then felt like opening a door I wasn't prepared to walk through. Around us, the string quartet had resumed playing, but the music seemed distant, as though I were listening from underwater. I sipped the champagne they offered me, its sweetness tangling with the metallic tang of anxiety at the back of my throat. I navigated through the throng toward a quieter hallway, my sister slipping in beside me. We walked in silence for a few steps, the echo of our footsteps swallowed by plush carpet. Then she said quietly, "Are you okay?" Her voice lacked its usual edge, replaced by hesitant worry. I exhaled, pushing down the swirl of adrenaline. "I'm more than okay," I replied, though the lie sounded brittle even to my own ears. "This is everything I've worked for." She studied me, her brow furrowing. "And yet you look like you've seen a ghost." I laughed, a short, sharp sound that felt foreign. "Maybe I have. The ghost of responsibility." She rolled her eyes but didn't disagree. The shift in my life was immense. Closing a multi-million-dollar deal was one thing. Managing the fallout, the relentless pace of corporate life, was something else entirely. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I slipped it out to see a message from my chief operating officer. "Great job today. Board meeting prep starts tomorrow at 9. I blinked twice, heart lurching. Tomorrow? Already? There was no grace period, no cushion of downtime. The board would want charts, projections, a roadmap for the next fiscal year. I slid the phone back and met my sister's gaze. "They want me at the office bright and early." She reached for my arm. "You should celebrate tonight." I hesitated, thinking of the late-night work sessions ahead, the dizzying travel schedule between New York and Chicago. "Tomorrow's another day," I said, though a part of me yearned to accept her offer, to toast this moment properly before sliding into the next challenge. She nudged me toward the bar. "First things first," she said. "Champagne is non-negotiable." I smiled, allowing myself a tentative nod. I rejoined the bar where my cousin Mark held court with half a dozen nieces and nephews, their eyes wide as he recounted the news. "He's practically a rock star now," one of them whispered. I caught their gaze and raised my glass in a small salute. The applause that followed felt like a spotlight, illuminating every doubt I'd harbored about my abilities. I thanked them again, then slipped away to find a moment of solitude. In the ladies' lounge, I washed my hands and looked at myself in the mirror. The reflection staring back wore a tailored suit and an expression I barely recognized. My eyes were bright with adrenaline, and my smile was tight. I splashed cool water on my face, trying to coax calm into my veins. The face in the mirror seemed untested by this level of success, as though it hadn't yet internalized the fact that I was no longer just my cousin's kid who tinkered with computers in a cramped loft. Stepping back into the main hall, I sought out familiar colleagues from the startup, those who'd been there before the deal, those who'd believed when the odds were stacked against us. They clustered near the hors d'oeuvres tray, their chatter punctuated by nervous laughter. As I approached, their smiles broadened. They crowded around me, hands on my shoulders, voices overlapping in gratitude and excitement. Each thank you, and we couldn't have done it without you, lodged like a stone in my chest, a reminder of the collective effort behind the triumph, but also a reminder that leadership would now demand far more than coding skills and pitch prowess. It would demand decisiveness, resilience, empathy, and the ability to steer a much larger ship through choppy waters. I cleared my throat, drawing their attention. I owe everything to you, I said softly. This isn't just my victory, it's ours. Their cheers rippled through the room once more, but I lifted a hand to quiet them. Tomorrow, we start planning the next chapter, I continued, feeling the weight of the responsibilities settle more firmly on my shoulders. We'll map out our roadmap, set our targets, and make sure Anderson Global sees the value we've built from day one. Their nods and murmurs of agreement warmed me, fueling my confidence. Yet beneath the warmth, I felt a ripple of tension. How would I navigate the politics of a corporate giant? Could I protect our startup spirit under a bureaucratic behemoth? As the evening wound down, I found myself back at the entrance, where the last guests were gathering their coats. The city lights of Manhattan glittered through the glass doors, a reminder that life outside this bubble marched on relentlessly. My sister joined me, slipping her arm through mine. Part 2 begins tomorrow, she said with a soft smile. I nodded, a sense of anticipation and unease coiling in my stomach. I gripped my briefcase tighter, feeling the reassuring weight of the acquisition agreement inside. The real test was just beginning, and I knew that success would require more than bold announcements and celebratory champagne. It would demand endurance, adaptability, and unwavering resolve, and I was determined not to let us down. The sky was still a slate gray when my alarm jolted me awake. I lay motionless for a moment, the events of last night swirling through my mind like film reels on fast forward. My body ached from the adrenaline high of the celebration, and yet, sleep had evaded me entirely. I swung my legs over the side of the bed, the cool hardwood floor grounding me as I breathed deeply. Today was the first official board meeting with Anderson Global, and I wasn't sure whether to feel exhilarated or terrified. I dressed quickly in the suit I had laid out the night before, straightened my tie, and glanced at my reflection. I looked the part of a confident leader, but inside I still felt the same kid coding away in a Brooklyn loft, uncertain if my work would ever matter. The coffee in my hand was a bitter reminder that the rest of the world didn't pause for anyone's insecurities. The ride to the office felt interminable. Manhattan streets were already alive with honking taxis and pedestrians in crisp business attire, all seemingly on urgent missions of their own. My phone buzzed with last-minute messages from my COO, reminding me to bring the financial projections, the integration plan, and talking points on culture alignment. I swallowed hard, nodding to the driver when he asked if I needed silence or music. I chose silence. Each block we passed brought me closer to a room full of seasoned executives who would scrutinize every slide I presented. I took another deep breath and reminded myself that if I could negotiate this acquisition deal, I could handle this meeting. But doubt lingered like a stubborn shadow. Stepping into the high-rise lobby, I was greeted by polished marble and smiling receptionists who handed me a visitor badge. The elevator ride up felt like an ascent toward destiny. When the doors opened on the 23rd floor, I stepped into a corridor lined with glass-walled conference rooms. I paused outside the largest door, where the nameplate read Anderson Global Boardroom. I placed my hand on the brushed steel handle, tested my composure, and entered. Around the long mahogany table sat a dozen executives, their expressions polite but reserved. At the head of the table was Victor Anderson himself, the patriarch, founder, and chairman. His steely gaze met mine, and for a moment, I felt the weight of decades of corporate legacy bearing down on me. I took a seat beside my COO and set down the leather folder containing the slides. The room was eerily silent as I connected my laptop to the projector. The first slide displayed our company logo alongside Anderson Global's emblem, linked by a handshake icon. I cleared my throat and began. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to present our vision for integrating Technova into Anderson Global's portfolio. My voice was steady, each word deliberate. I guided them through the journey of our startup from that cramped loft in Brooklyn, through the marathon of pitches and late-night coding sessions, to the moment we signed the acquisition agreement. I watched as some leaned forward, interested. Others remained impassive, notebooks open but pens still. I moved into the financial projections, highlighting revenue growth, market share, and projected returns on investment. Slides flew by, charts, graphs, bullet points. I explained our product roadmap for the next 18 months, emphasizing key milestones, resource needs, and potential challenges. Halfway through, Victor cleared his throat. His voice was calm, yet carried the authority of a man accustomed to command. Impressive growth, he said, but integrating a startup's agile culture into a global conglomerate often leads to friction. How do you plan to preserve Technova's spirit within Anderson Global's more rigid structure? I paused, choosing my words carefully. I believe in a hybrid model, I replied. We retain our small, empowered teams with decision-making autonomy, while leveraging Anderson Global's resources, capital, distribution networks, and industry expertise to scale responsibly. I propose quarterly culture audits and joint leadership workshops to ensure alignment and collaboration. Murmurs rippled around the room. Some nodded, others scribbled notes. I continued, fielding questions on talent retention, intellectual property integration, and potential market risks. In our past in a whirlwind of dialogue, challenges, and negotiations. By the time I concluded, my throat was dry, but I felt a surge of confidence. The executives exchanged looks, and Victor leaned back with a thoughtful expression. Your plan shows promise, he said, but success hinges on execution. We'll need clearly defined metrics and robust oversight. He paused, then smiled thinly. I look forward to seeing your first quarterly report. The meeting adjourned, and as I gathered my things, relief and exhaustion washed over me in equal measure. My COO clapped me on the back. You handled that beautifully, she said. I managed a tired smile, knowing the real work was only beginning. When I emerged into the bright afternoon light, my phone buzzed with messages from family and colleagues checking in on how the meeting went. I texted back brief responses, packing my laptop into my briefcase. My sister called moments later. So, she said excitedly, did you crush it? I exhaled. We'll see, I replied. They challenged me, but I think they bought in. She erupted into praise, but I cut her off with a laugh. I need to catch my breath first. She chuckled. Get some rest, you deserve it. I glanced at my reflection in the glass building across the street, someone altered by the weight of both triumph and responsibility. Back at home, I set my briefcase by the door and sank onto the couch. The quiet of my apartment, once a symbol of struggle, now felt like a haven. I stared at the file cabinet where the acquisition agreement lay neatly stored. The document that had once intimidated me now seemed like a portal to uncharted territory. I thought about my cousins, my sister, my aunt, and Uncle Jorge, all of whom had placed their hopes in me in some way. I wondered if I had made them proud, or if I had simply swapped one set of expectations for another, heavier one. My phone buzzed again, an email from Anderson Global HR scheduling orientation sessions for next week. I sighed, realizing there would be no downtime. The corporate world marched to a relentless beat. I stood and walked to the window, gazing at the city skyline. Below, traffic crawled and pedestrians hurried along the sidewalks, each person on their own journey. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath, letting the hum of the city fill my senses. I reminded myself why I had pursued this path: the thrill of innovation, the satisfaction of problem solving, and the dream of building something lasting. My heart swelled with both pride and a fierce determination not to let the fear of failure overshadow the excitement of opportunity. I opened my eyes and smiled, a genuine, unguarded expression. This was only the beginning. As dusk settled over Manhattan, I prepared dinner: simple pasta, a glass of red wine, and settled in front of my laptop to review tomorrow's agenda. The city lights flickered on one by one, mirroring the spark of ideas and challenges yet to come. I leaned back and whispered to myself, Let's see where we go from here. The journey that began in a cramped Brooklyn loft had led me to this moment of triumph and transition. Ahead lay a landscape of possibilities and obstacles, of late nights and boardroom battles. And though the path was uncertain, I felt ready to navigate it, to honor the trust of my family, to live up to the expectations of Anderson Global, and, most importantly, to stay true to the vision that had carried me this far. The final curtain call of my old life had come, and the first act of my new one was about to begin.